Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Small Business Edge webcast, sponsored by Pitney Bowes Financial Services. Today, I want to welcome two longtime friends of mine and of Small Business Edge, Karen Kerrigan and Barbara Weltman. Today, we're going to discuss the latest on taxes, regulations, and legislation in the SMB space. And obviously, there are too many moving parts, but hopefully Karen and Barbara can help make sense of it all. So with that, I want to welcome to the Small Business Edge webcast, Barbara Weltman, Karen Kerrigan.
Thank
Great
you.
to be here. Good to be here, Brian.
It's awesome. I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness.
You
The
are.
two smartest minds in small business, right? Well, we can throw in some other women there. Maybe Andrew Sherman. He can be the ball boy for the team. But this is great. I've actually wanted to do this for a long time. I've had you both on my podcasts in the past, and we've done a ton of work together. And I know that you two do a lot of work together, but I'm excited that we're finally getting this down where we're all talking at once. Maybe not at once, but on the same panel discussion. How's
Great.
that? All right, let's get started. Barbara, I'm going to give the first question to you. So you've authored the J.K. Lasser Small Business Taxes for a long time. How many years have you done that?
25 plus.
Wow, fantastic. And this is the Bible for small business owners and their accountants. Your supplement to the 2021 business taxes is now out. That's right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What were some of the biggest changes that small business owners saw and their accountants in that supplement?
Well, some of the changes came about because of the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2021. Primarily, okay.
I loved it. So that CAA,
CAA, right?
CAA.
This
That came out-
massive measure that
Right?
most people couldn't even read before they passed it, but had a lot of important provisions impacting small business.
And it's like 5,000 pages. or
So,
something.
whatever. It's just it's
something
massive.
obscene. And it comes out literally right at the end of December.
Exactly. It comes out
Okay.
in December. The main point
Mhm.
had to do with PPP loans, making sure that everybody knew that loan forgiveness was tax-free. But what changed was the ability to deduct expenses covered by the PPP loans. Initially, we all thought, well, you can't kind of double dip, get tax-free income and then take the deduction, but now you can. And so, and they also clarified that the SBA's emergency $10,000 advance was tax-free, as
the
well.
EIDL.
The EIDL loans,
Yeah.
yes, but the advance would be tax-free,
Mhm.
and the introduced a new kind of loan program for shuttered venue operators, and their loan forgiveness would be their grants would be tax-free, and still while being able to write off the expenses that you use the money for.
Yeah.
So payroll and utilities and rent and such. So that was the biggies. But I think don't overlook what we've known all along, which were some changes made earlier in 2020 under the CARES Act, like net operating loss carryback, which
Right.
for businesses that had losses in 2020, you have a 5-year carryback, so you can offset your income in those 5 years with your losses and get tax refund now. And that's really going to be a cash infusion for business now. And that's really a big one. Another provision that was introduced, I could go on for the whole program on this, but just looking ahead, they changed the deduction limit for business meals in 2021 and 2022 for meals provided at restaurants at 100% as an incentive to help restaurants, but businesses that lunch, this is a great thing.
Yeah. And what was that? 50%?
Yes, it's 50%, but it's going to be 100% for the 2 years.
Right. So really, it's almost all good news for small business owners.
Precisely. And one other thing, just to kind of throw in the mix before we move on, the American Rescue Plan Act, which is poised to be enacted, has a number of tax provisions, but by and large, they don't apply for 2020. So it's not gonna jar your tax returns for 2020.
Right. I think the message to our listeners and our viewers is you really need to take time to do your homework on what opportunities there are for you. As you said, that, you know, that the carry back the losses if you had in 2020 to get some refunds now, but also it's that win-win, which is such a rarity, right? That not only are you able to forgive the PPP money, but you're also able to deduct those expenses. I mean, that avoided a huge headache for a lot of small business owners that might not have been able to do that. And that's part of what got passed in December, correct?
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was through the efforts of the SBE Council and others who really pushed for this, because
Sure.
it was only through advocacy that we got this change.
Yeah. So Karen, when we all take you out to dinner at a restaurant, which we're going to write off 100% of, if it's a business expense, we'll all celebrate and toast to you and all the efforts that you and the SBE Council did for us in 2020.
Yes, and don't forget about, yeah, we'll also toast the employee retention tax credit too. All the employees
yeah.
that you were able to keep because of that, and there was improvement to that, and how that worked with PPP, very favorable
Right.
for small businesses as well. And then moving forward into 2021. So, but yeah, Barbara just sort of hit all the highlights, and you're right. You really should make sure you do your homework and on that, the leave credit and more, so that you can maximize your savings.
Yeah, and breaks for self-employed individuals.
That's
A
right.
lot of the breaks that we had for employers, they made comparable breaks for self-employed individuals. So like the paid sick leave and paid family leave, there are equivalent tax credits for self-employed individuals that suffered
Right.
during COVID.
Right. And great. So, and before we go on, I will say, and we'll do this at the end of the webcast, and I'll also put it on the resource pages. But if you're not subscribing to the SBE Council newsletter or to Barbara Weltman's idea of the day, and I love getting that kind of that compilation at the end of each month, you know, shame on you as a small business owner for not tapping into these resources, because all of the work that Barbara and Karen do on a daily basis, they share with all of their members and subscribers and followers. So this is who you want to be following on social media. And these are the newsletters you want to be subscribing to. Oh, Karen, let me ask you the second question. So this is a great one, and it's kind of short. Can entrepreneurship lift our economy out of the kind of the rubble of COVID-19 as it has in past downturns? Like, are we seeing the kind of innovation from entrepreneurs and small business owners and new business startups that, you know, when you look at many of the past recessions, you know, it was these business owners that kind of started hiring and opening up new locations. Can we expect the same in 2021, 2022, or that just too many regulations and legislation in place that will stymie that?
Well, the numbers and the data with regard to new business applications really is off the charts. So, you know, I would say we're far ahead of where we were in the Great Recession and in the aftermath of that, in terms of individuals who are interested in starting businesses. For example, in 2020, there were 4.5 million new business applications, and that's 24% higher than 2019. So you had more people interested or taking that first step in starting a business in 2020 during COVID-19 than you had in 2020 than you had in 2019.
Right.
And for those high propensity business applications, those who may be employers, those numbers are off the charts as well. In 2020, there are over 200,000 additional high propensity business applications in 2020 than 2019. So yes, the foundation is there, the entrepreneurial spirit is there, the opportunity is there. And as you brought up, Brian, is the policy climate there? And I would say what we're trying to do as an organization, and I testified before the House Small Business Committee on this, is we need a stable, certain business climate from a policy perspective in order to encourage this type of entrepreneurship and business creation.
Right.
At the federal level, look, it depends on what Congress and the White House does. I think if the White House and Congress wanted to do what they want to do in terms of minimum wage hikes, the Jobs Act, which will be the PRO Act, excuse me, that will be voted on this week, which would essentially undermine the entire independent contractor model. Then you're going to squash entrepreneurship and new business creation in its tracks. The other variable, so anyway, I think there's been decent pushback on that. We'll have to see how inflation plays into this, Brian, once this $1.9 trillion package moves through. But to the extent that the federal government can keep the tax rate stable, the regulatory climate stable, we're seeing an uptick, obviously, in new regulation. This economy can fully recover and rather quickly. The other factor, Brian, is it depends on what state you're in, right? States and
Yes.
localities. There is California, New York, your typical states where there's a lot of regulation, particularly in those urban areas like in New York City. Those areas are much more difficult, to sort of get going again, permits, and then you have other factors going on in those cities as well. And that's why you see the outflow of all these people who are moving from California, New York, into places like Texas and Florida, southern states, the Sun Belt, new business entrepreneurs and individuals, in order to move to more affordable and business-friendly environments.
And so that begs the question then. We're still obviously hopefully in the tail end of the pandemic, where stores are only partially reopened and people haven't fully embraced going out and going to restaurants, going to stores and whatnot. Do you think that when it does fully reopen and the cities and states like New York and California and their urban areas see the carnage that the pandemic has left, that they will somehow shift their policies in a way to make them more business friendly and more small business friendly?
They're going to have to, Brian. They're going to have to do that. I mean, it really depends on leadership at the local level. And if you are going to get a pro-business mayor, for example, in New York City, or if, there is going to be a tremendous shift in terms of the political climate in California, there's just, I tell you, there's so much momentum now of this outflow. It's going to be hard to pull people back, but they're going to have to do everything that they can, in order to attract the people back, to attract investment, and encourage people to start new businesses. They've got a lot of work ahead.
Yeah,
they do, but I also think that people have learned from the pandemic that maybe they can't rely on being an employee, that they need to have some kind of sideline activity going on, and maybe that will lead to more business growth. I think we're going to see, unless things change, I think that we're going to see a continued growth of entrepreneurship, either full-time or part-time. I just think there's a ton of part-time now.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case. And I think the good news is the PRO Act, although it will pass the House, and again, that's sort of the AB5 going national at the federal level.
Oh my gosh.
This is what the PRO Act is. I think it's going to have a much more difficult time passing the Senate. So the Senate is sort of like our firewall, given the close, how close it is in terms of the votes, and that you do have the Senator Mansions and, a few other senators who are concerned about very radical legislation that's going to upend small businesses and the opportunity for a strong recovery.
And the gig economy, right?
The whole gig economy.
So for some of our viewers and listeners who don't know what the PRO Act is, who wants to take a shot at explaining that to them in a nutshell, in layman's terms?
Well,
Well-
I mean, I can start. I mean, pretty
Yeah.
much, you know, the independent contractor model, the gig economy,
Yeah,
you know, is all dependent on individuals making choices in terms of whether they want to start a business, whether they want to be an employee, or whether they want to be an independent contractor. And, essentially the rules around the PRO Act in terms of what happened with AB5, it would really push people, make people employers. I mean, employees,
Employees.
whether they wanted to be or not.
What Karen's referring to, the it's the ABC test that was enacted in California,
right.
which is, it's virtually impossible for anybody like an Uber driver or anybody working in that kind of arrangement to be treated as an independent contractor. So you have to be an employee. That means as an employee, just on a tax level, you're not going to be able to write off any of your costs because you can't take miscellaneous itemized deductions now. So, none of your gas for driving your Uber is deductible. It's really a squeeze on independent contractors.
Right.
It is. But it's more than that. A lot of
Yeah.
it would invalidate the right to work laws that have been enacted in 27 states. It would enact a vague and confusing joint employer standard, which allows for the franchisor model, in this country, which has been very good for a lot of people wanting to start businesses by opening a franchise. Basically slanting a lot of the organizing rights in the favor of labor unions. So it would be devastating from an entrepreneurship and a new business creation perspective. There is no doubt about it. You would not have control over your business.
Well, and what about the liability to the company itself then, if these are your employees, right? From lawsuits or just from an insurance perspective, right? These are your employees now as opposed to independent contractors. Does that view them in a different vein?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And employment taxes and benefits that have to be
Yeah.
provided. And that's kind of the sort of the justification. Oh, we want to make sure that all these workers get all these benefits and things. But I think companies won't be able to use them.
Right.
They won't have jobs. That's the bottom line.
And it assumes that the independent contractor wants to be an employee.
And
in
a
most
lot
cases, they do not. They like their
Right.
flexibility. They like picking and choosing what type of work they want to do when they want to do it. So,
Right.
I mean, so Barbara's right. It would just be, well, it'd be costly, and just, for a really small business that wants to be able to outsource certain things before they fully scale, then then bring in-house employees as they need them, it would make it impossible, for
Right.
them to grow in that way.
Right, exactly. And it takes away a critical option for growth, that you could grow this through a virtual organization, through having a team of 1099s, as opposed to having everybody be an employee. Maybe I can have 20 people who are independent contractors. I can only have 2 or 3 if I have to go the employee model.
Right. So for the life of me, I have no idea why the House wants to vote on this. It'll do everything to undermine the economic recovery, but they're
Yeah.
moving full steam ahead, and we'll get a vote on that. So
There you go.
anyway.
There you go. So we'll keep our eyes on that.
Mhm.
Let's shift a little bit because I want to talk a little bit about the current PPP loan program, which is set to expire at the end of March. They have that short window where they're trying to help out the smallest of small
micro
businesses right now,
businesses.
micro
Yeah.
businesses.
Mhm.
And then they set aside, I think, $1 billion for businesses in underserved and underrepresented communities. That ends what? That ends in about a week, I think.
The end of March is
For all PPP, but it's still an
Right.
exclusive window for businesses with less than 20 employees. I
right.
think that ends like next week. What are your thoughts on this ending? Because there's still going to be probably north of $100 billion, right, in the loan program by the end of March. Why doesn't Congress just extend this to June?
Well, we'd like that.
Yes, they should really extend it to the end of the
The end
year.
of the, absolutely.
Or till
And
the money runs out.
Or till the money runs out, whichever comes first, right?
Right.
Right.
And they have to, Brian. I mean, well, right now, I mean, obviously it's a new administration. Yeah, the wheels are turning in PPP. But you know, they're sort of they're doing a little bit more due diligence in terms of these PPP applications. So there's a
Mhm.
big backlog in terms of thousands and thousands and thousands of loans.
Right.
The credit unions, the Bankers Association, they've all written a letter saying, look, there's such a big backlog now. If someone wants to get into the system right now, their loan probably would not be approved by the end of March. You know, so we need to extend the program
Right.
in order to allow all these people into the program that want to take advantage of it to allow them to do that. The other thing is the SBA, they changed some of the eligibility requirements for those who file a Schedule C. You know, before it was
Right.
net income, now it's gross income, which gives them the opportunity, as it should have from the beginning, to get a larger loan size, you know,
Right.
for their business.
Yeah, a
So
favorable change, but late in the game.
late in the
Well,
game.
and now all of the people who already filed it under the net income can't go back and then either rewrite it or get more money, right? They can't go back and do it on gross sales, right? Gross revenue.
Right. Well, that's another change that we would like to see made. If you've already applied, you know,
Right.
the opportunity to go back and to
Right.
reapply for additional dollars. So that's another change that we're trying to do right now. But even if the Congress did it by the end of the week, for example, or the SBA magically, you know, moved this new rule, would there be enough time, you know, for applicants to actually go back and get, you know, additional dollars? You know, and I would say the other thing, Brian, that's sort of holding back people from reapplying again. There's two more things. One is, you know, forgiveness is moving along, but not at a fast pace.
Right.
So there's
Yes.
many people who applied for their first PPP loan who are like, I'm going to wait till I get forgiven first before I apply
Yeah.
for my second one.
Yeah.
Exactly. They don't want to foul things up.
Yeah.
Well, they want to make sure this thing works.
Yes, that they
Right.
get forgiven before they take on potentially additional debt that
Right.
they may not be forgiven for. So there's that. So they're being careful in that regard. And then, Brian, there's another rule in terms of, you know, applying for the PPP, the second loan, you know, the 25%, you have to have a 25% reduction,
Right.
you know, in terms of your sales. Again, this is sort of a net number.
Mhm.
Net number compared to cost. Well, a lot of businesses last year during COVID-19, they had just a tremendous amount of new expenses, PPE. I mean, all these different
Right.
types of expenses that they've loaded on. So, you know, we just think there needs to be additional nips and tucks to the program.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, that reflect the reality of what is happening on the ground for small businesses to make it more practical for small businesses and allow for more eligibility across different sectors.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm in complete agreement. I think that when common sense prevails, they'll see that they should really allow the PPP loan program to do what it was intended to do, and that is be a kind of a lifeline to small business owners that are just trying to make it through the end of COVID and when everything reopens, and help them get back up on their feet. So why would you end it before COVID ended? Right. So, and when
Yeah.
there's still money left in the bank, in the program to
And the
help.
backlog and the big backlog in
Yeah,
applications
yeah.
and
Exactly.
those that have not yet been forgiven. So
Yeah.
so we need time. We need time in
So
order.
there's a lot of moving parts right now that I see, Barbara, with you know, your supplement to the taxes, right, and all of the things that business owners need to watch there. Karen, with, you know, PPP and other like idle programs that businesses can be tapping into. What about some other financing options? You know, I think these tend to get overlooked, you know, with all of the madness of government just throwing money out left and right at different programs. But, you know, what other options can business owners look at today that make sense financially and from a tax purpose? Like if they wanted to buy a building, or they were going to, you know, lease equipment, or have, you know, capital expenses. What do you recommend that they look at?
Well, let me just start off here and say that there are a lot of options, and it depends on what the purpose of the money is going to be. But certainly, crowdfunding is very hot for a lot of small businesses, whether it be just looking for contributions or loans or equity. That's one option. Another thing is that there's a lot of grant money out there, contests and such. FedEx has their annual small business grant contest. I think the application date ends today, March 9th, but there are other programs like that.
Sure.
And then I think, don't overlook the various SBA loan programs besides the EIDL, and also vendor financing. If you're getting equipment, talk to the vendors. They want you to buy or lease, and they'll help you do it. And before interest rates get too high, get in there.
Yeah.
I would agree with Barbara. I mean, the SBA, the traditional sort of basket of SBA loan programs, they're very favorable in terms of when you get an SBA loan. I mean, off the bat, it's 3 months, that you don't have to start paying back your loan. It was supposed to be 6 months, according to the last legislation there would be,
Right.
but they moved it to 3 months because of the availability of funds. And this is where we're working and pushing Congress, saying, look, we've got to move from this sort of relief and crisis to more recovery. And what can we do in terms of these SBA loan programs and other programs where we can get into recovery mode and take existing dollars and think about the low, no interest rate types of loans that can be paid over a long period of time. That's something that we're working on. But I would agree with Barbara on the regulation crowdfunding front, debt and equity based crowdfunding. It is exploding right now. Thank goodness. I think I just got an update from our friends at Crowdfund Capital Advisors, who are members of SBE Council, and February ended with $43 million in commitments from more than 43,000 investors. That's a 435% increase.
Wow.
Over year-over-year increase in commitments. And so we're seeing more people moving to platforms to raise money, more people looking to invest in these small businesses. And here's the other good thing, Brian, unless the Biden administration steps in late in the game, is that mid-March, the amount that you can increase actually goes from $1 million to $5 million in terms of Title III crowdfunding, which is basically debt or equity crowdfunding is both ordinary investors, or just average investors, retail investors. So that's just one of the favorable rule changes. There are others as well. So again, we're at the beginning, I think, of this massive growth in equity and debt-based crowdfunding, particularly because it leverages private sector capital and local capital. And so we're getting away from all this government money and sort of like, what can we do to leverage lots and lots of money out there in the private sector that we haven't leveraged? And I think, crowdfunding is the way to do that for sure. Right.
And then obviously there's the traditional institutions,
friends
like
and
banks.
Family and fools.
those two. But I think there's a plethora of options that you have now, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Pitney Bowes Financial Services, who is a great champion of small businesses, where they would love to have conversations, probably the same as your credit union and your local banks, right? I think now is a great time to, if you're thinking about growing your business, it's such a huge opportunity because it's a depressed market, right? Barriers to entry have dropped in so many areas, and it's a buyer's market in many industries. I've had some incredible examples of people who've negotiated leases in New York City, 5 and 10-year leases at 40 cents on the dollar. 40 cents on the dollar right now. And some are negotiated, some are renegotiated. And they're saying, we're thinking about moving. Don't move. Well, what can you do for me? I'll cut your rent. How much will you cut it? And then that's the starting point. And so, it's these great opportunities. And if you were thinking about buying something, again, now is the time. There's a lot of money out there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but money is pretty inexpensive, right? The interest rates are, I mean, think about what interest rates were 10, 20 years ago compared to what they are now. You know, it's a great opportunity for a smart business owner to really establish themselves for the long term and grow their
And
business.
and Brian, there's also obviously fintech, so many financial,
Oh, yeah.
technology companies. And, I think they've really done a good job in terms of an industry in being, self-regulating, in terms of being very transparent in terms of the cost of capital and the terms. And there is a place for that, right?
Yeah.
For fintech and for businesses that, really need that cash, right away, and have an opportunity right in front of them that
Right.
they need to take advantage of, and they just need the speed. They need the speed of fintech, as opposed to what is a slower process at
Right.
most banks or traditional financial institutions.
Right. You have to understand, like, if you're a business owner, you got to have all your financial ducks in a row,
Mhm.
right? I mean, so that you can take advantage of these opportunities. So, I hope that every viewer and every listener today, the next phone call you make is to your accountant and saying, we have to talk. I need to know exactly where I am and what my opportunities are for 2021. Because when the green flag goes up, I have a feeling the economy, with the $1.9 trillion cash infusion and the stimulus and PPP, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of pent up demand that's going to be let loose on the economy. I could be wrong, but that's not the time that you want to say, okay, let's build our infrastructure. That's the time where you need to execute on a plan that hopefully you're putting together right now, right? You're putting the finishing touches on it right now. So, all right, we're kind of in that home stretch of the webcast, which is again phenomenal. I thank you so much for all of your insights and your wisdom. I want to touch briefly on the $15 an hour minimum wage, which was set aside in the Senate. The parliamentarian said that due to a technicality, it can't be part of the $1.9 trillion relief package. Where do we stand right now on that proposal, that bill? And if it does get passed, obviously it'll be a graduated increase to $15. They want it to be there by 2025. What do you think happens to small businesses if that does go into effect? Karen.
Well,
Barbara.
Karen. Well, just from the small business owners I talked to, first of all, there are regional differences. So it's different depending on where you are in the country. I mean, $15 in metropolitan areas is different from smaller cities and rural areas, and it's different. But I know for many small businesses, they've already had to come up to kind of that level when the Walmarts and other big companies are paying the minimum, are paying higher wages just to compete with them to get it and keep employees. They've had to increase their rates. The problem or the challenge rather for small business is kind of the ripple effect. It's not just the minimum, it's not just the entry level employee, but then you have to increase the pay for everybody because it just, equity, it's just something you have to do. So I kind of think that's the challenge, but I think we as small business owners have to recognize it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is, if it passed, if it went through, there's no doubt it would have a harmful impact on many businesses in low cost areas of the country who maybe don't have, those Walmarts, or maybe like, the restaurant industry or certain sectors
Sure.
where you have the tipped wage as well, where you're basically getting rid of the tip wage, and it would totally change and transform that industry. But look, it's not happening on the Senate side in this latest pack. It's not in this latest package, but interestingly enough, over on the Senate side, you had two Republicans, Tom Cotton and Mitt Romney, who did introduce a $10 minimum wage
Okay.
increase. But it had certain exemptions, and if you're really small, I mean, all these different phase-in things. So, maybe that's a little bit more practical, and reasonable, for many small businesses. But the bottom line is that I think something will happen. It's not going to be the 15, I think, at the national level. Again, you have to get through the Senate. And, certain Democrat senators said they're not going to vote for a $15 minimum wage. And with
Right.
a 50-50 split,
Well, the only thing is that they possibly could do it if, depending on how long they spread it out. In other words, they could allow a victory for the $15 wage, but it might not go into effect for 20 years or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
So who knows?
Right. And I like the idea of allowing the market to play it out, right? So Costco, Walmart says $15 an hour. Costco comes back and says $16 an hour. And we all know how that affects small business owners. If you want to play in the game, you're going to have to offer those kinds of wages, whatever the comparable wages are in your area, if you want to find the best talent. So the other thing,
or you don't, or you don't hire, you know what I mean? You move to
That's the problem.
technology, you move to a different business model. So
right,
then you're eliminating jobs, in
right.
that entry level for, the young people who really need those work experiences. So it's going to be interesting. I still think the states will continue to move on it. That's where I think all the action should be, at the state level, and depending
Yes.
upon sort of local circumstances, local labor conditions, local costs, all of that. But I particularly now when we're in the middle of a pandemic and in a recovery,
Right.
again, even thinking about imposing new costs or any costs on small businesses, just I think is really absurd.
Yeah.
And let's talk about this when the economy is roaring,
Right.
not when we're trying to claw our way out of this. So
Right. Don't kick us when we're down.
yeah.
I really like the idea of giving it to the states and allowing them to decide.
And that's what they're doing. I
Yeah.
mean, we have a system that's already doing that. So
Right. Well, I had a quick anecdote, and then I'll move to my last question. But I had breakfast with a good friend this morning, and he owns a bunch of fast food franchises. And I asked him that question. I said, in one of your restaurants, how many employees do you have? And he said, I probably have about 60 per restaurant. And I said, what would a $15 minimum wage do to you? He said, oh, that's easy. I would just automate everything, and I'd fire 50 of them. I'd fire 50, and I would automate the cooking, because this technology is already starting to come out. But I'd automate the ordering, the cooking, and I just have people there who could clean up and people who could hand the food to you and take your money. So I would
even those people could be robots in the future.
They could be.
I think this is that. They're already doing that in
Yes.
some fast food places.
Right. So that's all they'll do, is they'll expedite the transfer over to artificial intelligence and automate.
And do we really want, look at a restaurant experience when you go, okay, there's different types. There's fast food, there's
Fine
slow
dining.
food, and there's restaurants.
Yeah.
But I think part of going to a restaurant, is having the waiter, the conversations, having the chef, and their team. It just makes it very special, and that's the experience, right? That we all love.
I think the three of us should open a restaurant. We'll call it the Jetsons, because that's where it's headed. Now, it's funny, go back and watch the Jetsons, one of their cartoons now, and see how, cartoons back then have become today's reality. It's pretty interesting. So, all right, last question. And again, I appreciate both your times today. I think this is very invaluable, and I hope people watch this over and over and use it as kind of a reference guide when they're running their businesses. But as we start to look at the 2021 in two halves, right? The first half being what it is. It's a closed economy, pandemic, trying to get relief packages passed. And then the second half of the year, hopefully a much more open economy with a huge cash infusion, and businesses up and running. What are one or two pieces of advice that you would give to small business owners who once again have to pivot back to this new abnormal way of doing business?
Well, I don't think that things are necessarily going to go back. I think we've learned a lot. For example, I think remote workers are going to stay remote for a lot, in many cases by choice, or just the ability of businesses to get the appropriate help that they need, regardless of where a particular employee is located. And I think businesses are going to have to figure out what to do with their existing commercial space. You talked about cutting rents, but I just think that you just look at the malls where stores have closed, and I think we're going to have to, things are going to be different in many ways. We're not going to go back. I think people have gotten used to getting delivery, and businesses are going to have to figure out how to make that profitable. I think the Grubhub fees are certainly cut in tremendously to restaurant revenue, but they've had to do it to survive. I think going forward, we're going to have to see what the model will be. I don't think we really have the answers yet.
A hybrid model is kind of like what you're leaning at. All right, Karen?
I think Barbara's right. I think, what I would tell business owners is to, continue to think confidently, optimistically, be innovative, but continue to sort of, plan somewhat conservatively, okay? Because look at, this 1.9 trillion is set to go into the economy. There's still even $1 trillion left in DC that hasn't even gone into the economy. But there's still, well, I think what we've learned from 2020 and a lot of these trends is like, expect the unexpected, right?
Right.
And so we don't know what's going to happen with inflation. We don't know, when people get their hands on this money, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to continue to save and pay down their debt? Certainly there'll be more disposable income, and I think small businesses will get that lift, but how much of a lift will it be? I'm not quite sure. I saw an interesting data point that revealed that 50% of younger people who are getting, these checks from the government, these stimulus checks, are going to invest. They're going to invest that money. So, again, there's where the disease is going in terms of the variants. There's certainly some trends that we can look to. Barbara has mentioned those. There's more older people, tons more buying online. So those trends we know are in place. And, but again, I would just be ready to pivot again.
Yeah.
And to, and continue to invest in that technology, because it will make a difference. No matter what type of economy we end up in, that technology is going to serve you well into the future, whether we go back to normal or abnormal. As you put it, Brian.
Yeah, great point. And the only thing I would add to it is, work in 30-day increments. Don't set a plan in place that locks you in for the next 6 months or the rest of 2021, because to your point, Karen, and to your point, Barbara, things are going to change, right? Things may not go back fully the way we think. And if they don't, then what's your plan of action? And if they stay as a hybrid model, or that cash infusion of the relief package brings opportunity, how are you going to take advantage of it?
That's why, Brian, I think more than ever, even in a great economy, and in a competitive economy, you need to stay in contact with your customers, your clients, your market. This is more important than ever. And you should be asking them questions all the time. How can we do things better? What are we doing things? What is, the other business doing that we should be doing? What are you looking for in terms of new products and services? What are you going to do with that stimulus money that comes in? I think, it's more important than ever now to really stay in touch with your customers and with your niche markets and sort of where they're going.
Yeah.
And of course, always you have to watch your costs, and you have to think as businesses recover, try to get rid of your debt, because interest rates are only going to go up. They're not going down. You don't want that burden on your shoulders if we hit another snag and another setback. And just, keep an eye on things and stay in contact, not only with your customers, but also with all of your business advisors, your CPA, and just to make sure that you have a handle on your numbers.
Yeah,
Mhm.
this is great. That's what a great way to end this webcast. Great advice. Map your future out in 30-day increments and have your finger on the pulse of everything that's happening in your ecosystem. And to Barbara's point, have that board of advisors, because they're going to be able to see things and hear things that you don't, and opportunities. So if our listeners and viewers wanted to get more information about your small business taxes supplement, Barbara, or Karen, how to become a member of the SBE Council and get your newsletter, what are some of the best ways that they can reach out to you? Barbara, how about you first?
Go to bigideasforsmallbusiness.com. You can see the supplement. You can sign up for the idea of the day that you mentioned earlier, and see a lot of other resources for small business.
Big Ideas, and it's the number 4 or FOR?
FOR.
Okay.
Big
So
Ideas for Small Business.
bigideasforsmallbusinesses.com.
Business
Barbara,
singular.
business.
Big Ideas for Small Business.com.
And we'll put it on the resource page. And
Great.
you can find Barbara, just Google Barbara and Karen, and you'll see 9 zillion results. Type in their name in small business. Karen, what's the best way for listeners to reach out to you or to the council?
SBEcouncil.org is our website. Twitter @SBE Council, Facebook SBE Council, Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council. You could sign up for our e-news, our e-newsletter, our podcasts. We're doing, daily podcasts now with 21 Hats and Lauren Feldman. We got a lot of great resources for the business owner, not only in terms of tracking policy, but also tracking the trends and what's happening in the marketplace.
Good. Well, I hope you see a huge influx of new, traffic to your website and people who want to join the council, because you're some of the greatest resources that small business owners have. So thank you both for today. Thank you for your continued support of small business throughout the year. And we look forward to having you back on the podcast or a webcast, or maybe even at an event in the near future. Hold the phones. So I also want to thank Pitney Bowes Financial Services for being a great supporter of Small Business Edge and of all small business owners around the country, especially over the last year. And lastly, I want to thank our viewers and listeners and the people who, bring us your questions, your comments, your feedback. Keep that coming. You can reach me at brian@smallbusinessedge.com. I'll read every email, and I try and respond in a timely manner. So with that, I want to thank Barbara and Karen again, and we will see you all next week on another edition of the Small Business Edge webcast. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.